This is mind-blowing. The dark truth behind a perfect life. Secrets, shattered trust, and a golden child. I've always believed that life was supposed to be simple and steady. I'm Michael, 39 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've cherished the balance of routine and love in my life. I met Lauren back in 2011, a chance encounter that seemed almost too perfectly timed. Lauren, with her keen eye for beauty and creativity, quickly captivated me. Even then, I could sense that her passion for interior design wasn't just a job. It was a calling, one that would eventually color every corner of our shared world. We fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. In 2015, we made it official, tying the knot and stepping into a future we believed was mapped out by fate. Marriage, in those early days, was a celebration of every small moment. A gentle nod in the morning, the way our hands instinctively reached for each other during stressful days at work, and the laughter that echoed through our home as we shared our dreams. At the time, I worked as a building maintenance engineer, a job that might sound mundane to some, but for me, it provided the steady rhythm of life. Every day presented a new puzzle, a challenge that kept my mind sharp and my hands busy. Meanwhile, Lauren was weaving magic with her designs, transforming spaces and imbuing them with personality. Her work wasn't just about decorating rooms. It was about creating environments where people could truly feel at home. Together, we built a comfortable life, one that many would envy. Our stable incomes allowed us to not only pay the bills but also to invest in our dreams. With every renovation project I completed and every space Lauren redesigned, we grew closer, learning more about each other's strengths and vulnerabilities. We made the conscious decision to start a family, and soon our home was blessed with 3 children. The laughter and chaos that they brought into our lives was both overwhelming and incredibly fulfilling. Back then, everything seemed so straightforward. Our days were filled with predictable routines and small, shared victories. Yet, even in those moments of calm, there was an undercurrent of anticipation. A whisper that perhaps our story was destined to be more complex than just the sum of its parts. I never imagined that the stability we so carefully nurtured could ever be shaken. But as I look back on those seemingly perfect beginnings, I can't help but feel that something extraordinary was already on the horizon, waiting to unravel the tapestry of our everyday life. My car breaking down was the kind of minor catastrophe you'd expect to handle with a shrug, until it began to unravel parts of our routine that I never even realized were so delicate. One morning, after discovering that my old, reliable car had finally decided to call it quits, Lauren stepped in without hesitation. She offered to drive me to work, and I was grateful for the unexpected lifeline. That ride, which initially felt like a small detour in our day, ended up changing everything in ways I couldn't have foreseen. It wasn't long before I started noticing subtle changes. On that very first ride, while we navigated through the morning traffic together, I caught snippets of conversation between Lauren and someone I didn't recognize standing by the office entrance. Later, I learned it was Travis, a colleague from work. Travis was the kind of guy who always seemed to light up the room with his easy smile and quick wit. At first, I chalked it up to the usual friendly banter you'd expect between coworkers. But then there was Naomi, a diligent office worker whose cheerful disposition was as infectious as Travis's laughter. Lauren and Naomi seemed to click in a way that made their daily chats effortless and full of inside jokes. As the weeks passed, even after I managed to get my car fixed and resumed my own commute, Lauren continued to spend her mornings with them. At first, I tried to dismiss it as nothing more than a simple shift in logistics. After all, friendships at work often blossom unexpectedly. Yet, every time I pulled into the parking lot and saw Lauren lingering near the group, sharing laughter and exchanging knowing glances, a nagging thought began to take root. I'd watch from a distance as they gathered by the coffee machine or strolled together toward the entrance, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something more was unfolding beneath the surface. I began to wonder if the daily routine that had once bound us so seamlessly was now being subtly rewritten. Was it really just a case of convenient camaraderie? Or was there something deeper behind those shared smiles and lingering goodbyes? I told myself that people's lives are full of unexpected connections. After all, Lauren had always been the kind of person who forged meaningful bonds with those around her. Still, it was hard not to notice the difference in her demeanor when she was with Travis and Naomi. There was an ease, a spark that seemed to brighten her face in a way that was both familiar and entirely new. I found myself second-guessing my assumptions, wondering if I was overreacting to a situation that was, in all likelihood, innocuous. Yet, as the morning rides continued, the pattern became undeniable. Even on days when my car was perfectly reliable, Lauren would choose to spend time with them. Our once shared routine was slowly morphing into something more compartmentalized, a division of our time that left me on the periphery of her morning world. I started to miss the quiet intimacy we once shared on our drives together, the moments when the world outside seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us in our little bubble. The more I observed, the more I felt an undercurrent of tension ripple through our interactions. I couldn't pinpoint exactly when the shift had begun, but I started to feel as if I were watching the gradual emergence of a new dynamic, one in which Lauren was becoming an integral part of a trio I hadn't signed up for. At the same time, I was painfully aware of my own reluctance to admit that something might be changing in our relationship. I had always prided myself on our steady, reliable partnership, and the thought of that foundation trembling was both unsettling and hard to face. Every day, as I drove into work and saw Lauren's smile brightening in a different context, surrounded by laughter and shared moments with Travis and Naomi, I found myself caught between trust and an inexplicable sense of loss. There was a mystery to it all that I couldn't quite unravel. Were they simply sharing a friendship born of long days and common routines, or was there a hidden current drawing Lauren away from the us that I knew so well? In the back of my mind, I began to worry that what once felt like a small, manageable hiccup had now evolved into something far more significant. And as the days turned into weeks, I couldn't help but brace myself for the possibility that the familiar world I'd built with Lauren was on the verge of a transformation I hadn't asked for. A transformation that might unravel the very fabric of our carefully crafted life. I was still reeling from the subtle changes I'd noticed in Lauren's behavior when an unexpected call shattered the fragile calm of my evening. The phone rang, and the name flashing on the screen was Jared, a former colleague whose straightforward nature I once respected. His voice, usually measured and calm, now carried a tone laced with urgency and a hint of regret. "Michael, I know this is going to sound off, but I have to tell you something," Jared began, and each word he spoke seemed to echo in the quiet of my living room. He told me that last Sunday, while he was stuck at work late, he had seen Lauren outside Travis's house. It wasn't just a casual visit, either. According to him, Lauren had not only been there but had actually danced for Travis. I remember the pause that followed his revelation, a silence heavy with implication. His words left little room for doubt, and the image of Lauren dancing under the dim lights of someone else's living room burned in my mind. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence, the remnants of our once secure routine now splintering around me. The warmth and comfort I had always associated with our marriage were now laced with a bitter undercurrent of betrayal. I tried to convince myself that perhaps Jared had misunderstood something, that his eyes had deceived him in the haze of a long workday. After all, Lauren had always been vibrant, a woman who embraced life with a passion that sometimes defied convention. But the thought gnawed at me relentlessly. In the days that followed, every small change in Lauren's behavior seemed magnified, like shards of evidence I couldn't ignore. She began coming home later than usual, her arrival shrouded in an air of hurried mystery. I noticed her constantly clutching her phone, her conversations conducted in hushed tones that never included me. The Lauren I knew warm, engaged, and always ready with a smile, was slowly retreating behind a wall of indifference and evasiveness. One evening stands out in my memory with painful clarity. I had returned from work, expecting to find solace in the familiar comfort of our shared space, only to catch her in the midst of another one of those clandestine phone calls. When I asked if everything was all right, her response was a perfunctory, almost rehearsed, reassurance that left me colder than before. The ease with which she dismissed my concerns only deepened the sense of distance growing between us. It was as if every attempt I made to reach her pushed her further away, leaving behind a chasm filled with half-truths and whispered secrets. Every conversation, every stolen glance, began to pile up in my mind, creating a tapestry of suspicion that was impossible to ignore. I found myself questioning not just Lauren's whereabouts, but also the nature of her interactions with Travis, a man who had once been nothing more than a friendly coworker. What started as a convenient arrangement, with Lauren driving me to work when my car broke down, had morphed into something more intimate, more charged with unspoken meaning. The realization stung sharply. The very person I had built my life with now seemed to be slipping away into a world where I no longer belonged. My thoughts became a battlefield of conflicting emotions. On one hand, I clung to memories of our early years, the laughter we shared during long drives, the quiet moments that had once made every day feel significant. On the other, I was forced to confront the undeniable evidence of change. Lauren's growing distance, her late-night absences, and the constant hum of her phone conversations that carried secrets I was not meant to understand. The call from Jared had not just been a warning. It was a spark that lit a fire of doubts in my mind. I began to wonder if there was something more to Lauren's interactions with Travis, a hidden intimacy or a forbidden excitement that I had never seen before. Each day, as I drove into work and noticed the lingering moments Lauren spent with him and even with Naomi, I felt a growing sense of isolation. It was as if our shared life was being quietly partitioned off, piece by piece, into compartments where I no longer held a key. I spent countless nights awake, turning over every detail of our recent interactions. Was it possible that the woman I loved was now leading a double life? The idea was both horrifying and, in a twisted way, inevitable, because deep down, I had always known that life was full of unexpected twists and turns. Yet, nothing could have prepared me for the magnitude of what seemed to be unraveling right before my eyes. As the weeks went by, I found myself teetering on the edge of despair and determination. Part of me desperately clung to the hope that there was a reasonable explanation, a misunderstanding that could be resolved with a heartfelt conversation. But another part, a more cynical and protective part of me, feared that I was witnessing the slow disintegration of the trust that had once been the cornerstone of our marriage. The more I observed, the more the signs pointed to a hidden world I had never been invited into, a world where Lauren was not the woman I thought I knew. The realization was a brutal one. Nothing in life, no matter how meticulously planned, could remain unaltered forever. The steady, comforting patterns of our daily routines had begun to fracture, replaced by a growing sense of alienation and uncertainty. I was caught in a whirlwind of suspicion, each moment more painful than the last, as I grappled with the possibility that the love of my life might be entangled in a web of secrets that I could never untangle. In those long, sleepless nights, my mind played out every scenario, every possibility of betrayal. I recalled the laughter we shared, the long talks over coffee, the dreams we once painted together for our future. And now, with every suspicious glance and every unexplained late return, those dreams seemed to be dissolving into shadows and echoes. The trust we had built over years of shared experiences was now under siege by the murmur of clandestine meetings and whispered conversations, elements that I could neither control nor fully understand. I knew that the time had come to confront these unsettling truths. The quiet whispers of suspicion had grown too loud, and the veneer of our once perfect life was beginning to crack. The decision weighed heavily on me. Confront the issue head-on, risking a confrontation that might irrevocably change everything, or continue to let the silence build into an insurmountable barrier between us. The uncertainty was agonizing, and every instinct urged me to seek clarity, even if it meant facing a painful reality. I began to consider how I might piece together the fragments of our unraveling life. I wondered if there was a way to reach Lauren, to understand what she had become, and whether the connection we once cherished could be salvaged. Yet, each time I attempted to bridge the gap with gentle questions or quiet reassurances, I was met with evasions and hollow responses. The distance between us grew more tangible, each unanswered question a stark reminder that something was irretrievably amiss. As I sat alone, wrestling with the bitter knowledge of what might be occurring behind closed doors, I realized that the person I had loved and trusted was now shrouded in mystery. My mind replayed Jared's words, the image of Lauren dancing for Travis, a scene that was now burned into my memory. It was a picture that haunted my thoughts, a symbol of the fracture that had splintered our life together. In that dark space between hope and despair, I vowed to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The uncertainty of our future loomed large, but I understood that ignorance would only lead to further heartache. The time had come to confront the reality that had slowly seeped into our lives, a reality where the past few weeks were a prelude to a story I never wanted to be a part of, yet one that was now inescapable. Every day, as I navigated the corridors of our once happy home, I carried with me the weight of these suspicions, the sting of Jared's warning, and the unsettling change in Lauren's demeanor. It was a bittersweet existence, where the familiar was marred by the unknown, and every smile now felt like a mask concealing deeper truths. And so, I stood at the precipice of a new and terrifying reality, unsure of what lay ahead but knowing that the only path forward was to face the storm head-on, even if it meant shattering the remnants of a life I had so carefully built. In that moment, the question that haunted me wasn't just about what Lauren was doing or with whom, but about the very nature of love and trust. Was it possible that the person I had believed to be my partner was now a stranger, lost in a labyrinth of secrets and desires? As the days turned into nights filled with restless contemplation, I realized that nothing was as it seemed, and that the truth, however painful, was the only way to reclaim the life we once knew. I reached a point where my doubts and fears were no longer silent whispers. They were a relentless chorus that I could no longer ignore. I had decided, with a heavy heart and a mind clouded by suspicion, that the only way to get some clarity was to capture concrete evidence. I began researching discrete recording devices, poring over reviews and technical forums late into the night, all in the hope of finding something small enough to slip unnoticed into Lauren's car. In my mind, this was a necessary step, a desperate bid to reclaim some sense of control in a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond my grasp. The plan was simple, or so I had convinced myself. I would wait until Lauren was out for the day, perhaps on one of her routine trips with Travis, and then, in the privacy of our garage, I would install the tiny device. It was designed to be inconspicuous, a silent observer that would record any conversation or secret rendezvous that might confirm the growing suspicions that had gnawed at me for weeks. I reassured myself that I was doing this not out of spite, but as a means to finally understand what was happening behind closed doors. The evidence, I thought, would either absolve me of unfounded jealousy or force me to confront a betrayal I'd long dreaded. I had even managed to hide the little gadget in a drawer, ready for the perfect moment when everything would fall into place. I rehearsed the steps in my head: wait for her to leave, slip the device into the car, and later, when I had some privacy, listen to the recordings. Every detail was mapped out in what felt like a cold, calculated plan. One that I hoped would bring some clarity to the chaos that was slowly tearing our life apart. But before I could even take the first step to execute my plan, the situation escalated in a way I never could have predicted. It was one of those evenings when the ordinary rhythms of life suddenly shift into something unrecognizable. I was in our garage, heart pounding and mind churning with anxious thoughts about the evidence I so desperately needed, when I heard a commotion from inside the house. At first, it was just a low murmur of voices, but then Lauren's tone cut through the noise, sharp, urgent, and laced with a distress I'd never heard before. I froze in the doorway, the recording device still hidden in my pocket, as I strained to catch the fragments of conversation coming from the living room. It wasn't just a casual disagreement or a minor spat. There was an intensity in her voice that immediately set off alarm bells in my head. I couldn't see the other person clearly, but the heated back and forth, the raised voices and desperate inflections, spoke volumes about the gravity of the situation. In that moment, my well-laid plans for capturing evidence felt both trivial and tragically mistimed. I edged closer, torn between the instinct to intervene and the fear of being drawn into a confrontation I wasn't prepared for. Every step I took was accompanied by a mounting sense of dread. What if this was more than just an argument? What if the escalation I had been dreading had already transformed our lives irreversibly? I could no longer rely solely on the cold logic of gathering evidence. The raw immediacy of the moment demanded my full attention. Inside, Lauren's words grew sharper, more frantic. I couldn't make out every word, but I could tell that she was fighting for control. Her voice a mix of anger, desperation, and something else I couldn't quite place. The intensity of the exchange left me paralyzed, the recording device now a silent, useless witness to the unfolding drama. I stood there, hidden in the shadows, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure she could hear it. In that instant, every carefully planned step, every effort to maintain control over my spiraling thoughts, crumbled under the weight of the raw emotion echoing from inside the house. As the minutes stretched on, the sound of raised voices gave way to a heavy, suffocating silence, punctuated only by the occasional, frantic footsteps. I realized with a sinking feeling that whatever was happening had escalated far beyond a simple argument or the clandestine actions I had feared. There was a palpable tension in the air, a sense that everything was about to change in a way that I couldn't control or even begin to understand. The device in my pocket felt like a cold reminder of my failed attempt at rationality. In that tense moment, the idea of gathering evidence through technology seemed laughably inadequate compared to the complex, human drama unfolding before me. The situation was no longer something that could be neatly captured by a tiny recorder hidden in the upholstery of a car. It was a swirling storm of emotions and confrontations that demanded immediate attention. I took a deep, shuddering breath and stepped back into the garage, trying to steady my racing thoughts. The recording device remained in my hand, a symbol of my desperate need to hold on to some shred of control in a life that was rapidly unraveling. But the urgency of the evening had rendered my plan obsolete. The reality that I was forced to confront was raw and immediate. The fragile threads of trust and familiarity that had held our family together were now tangled in a web of anger, fear, and possibly betrayal. That night, as I sat alone in the dim light of the garage, the weight of my actions and inactions pressed down on me. I realized that in the quest for proof, I had been blinded by my own doubts that had clouded my ability to see what was truly happening right before my eyes. The situation had escalated so quickly that there was no turning back, no neatly packaged evidence to refer to later. All that remained was the unsettling truth that our life was changing in ways I had never anticipated, leaving me to grapple with a reality far more painful and complicated than any recording could ever reveal. That Sunday started out with what I now realize was the first small crack in our carefully built life. In the morning, Lauren told me she was taking the kids to see the latest animated movie, a routine family outing that should have been a comforting, familiar ritual. But as the day wore on, I began to notice something off. The children were still at home, safe with their babysitter, while Lauren's car was nowhere to be seen on the usual route. At first, I brushed it off as a minor mix-up in plans. Yet, deep down, a gnawing suspicion took hold of me, a feeling that the story she told was nothing more than a convenient excuse. By the time afternoon rolled around, the fragments of her lies began to form a picture I couldn't ignore. Lauren had been vague about her whereabouts, and her sudden change of plans had left me with an unsettling certainty that something wasn't right. Memories of her increasingly frequent absences and the hushed phone calls that punctuated our mornings resurfaced, and it all pointed to one destination: Travis's house. The idea took shape in my mind with the slow certainty of a truth I'd been reluctant to accept, and soon I knew I had to confront it head-on. My heart pounded as I drove to Travis's place. The familiar roads transformed into conduits leading me to a dark, unknown future. Every red light and every turn felt charged with the weight of my mounting dread. When I finally arrived, a chill ran down my spine as I noticed a car parked in the driveway that I instantly recognized. It was Lauren's. That single, silent confirmation was more than enough to force me to act. I parked my own car a short distance away, taking a deep breath to steady my shaking hands, and then I made my way toward the building with a mix of trepidation and desperate resolve. Inside, I headed for the driver's lounge, a place that had once been an innocuous part of daily routines, but now felt like the stage for a tragedy unfolding in real time. The moment I stepped into that room, my worst fears came crashing down around me. There, under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, I saw Lauren, not surrounded by coworkers or casually chatting, but intimately involved with Travis. The scene was so raw and unfiltered that it nearly stopped my heart. Every detail of the moment was a blow, a painful confirmation that the life I thought I knew was nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. Frozen in place, I fumbled for my phone. My mind was a tumult of shock, anger, and disbelief, but I knew I needed evidence. Proof of this betrayal that had been slowly gnawing at my soul. With trembling fingers, I started recording the scene. Each second that ticked by was an eternity. Every intimate gesture, every whispered word between Lauren and Travis was etched into the digital memory of my phone. The pain was unbearable, and I couldn't hold back any longer. My voice, raw and full of anguish, erupted into the charged silence of that room as I shouted, "Lauren, how could you do this?" The sound of my own voice seemed surreal, reverberating off the walls as if demanding an answer. Lauren paused for a heartbeat and then, what struck me the most? She looked at me with an almost eerie indifference. There was no tear, no flicker of remorse, only a cold detachment that made my skin crawl. "Just leave," she said calmly, as if dismissing a minor inconvenience rather than shattering a marriage. And then, almost casually, she added the final, devastating line, "I don't love you as much as you think." In that moment, every ounce of trust, every shared dream, every whispered promise we had built over years of laughter and shared struggles disintegrated into nothingness. The raw evidence of her betrayal was undeniable, and yet her nonchalance was far more painful than the act itself. I stood there, phone still recording, grappling with the impossible mixture of disbelief, rage, and sorrow that threatened to engulf me. As I shouted for answers, demanding to know how everything we'd built could come undone so suddenly, Lauren's face remained impassive, a mask of calm that made the betrayal all the more bitter. Her words, delivered with a detached finality, were like a death knell to the life I had once known. The fact that she had lied about taking the children to an animated movie, leaving them safely at home while she pursued this secret rendezvous, added an extra layer of cruelty to the betrayal. It wasn't just that she'd been unfaithful. It was that she had meticulously constructed an elaborate facade to hide it from me. The driver's lounge, a place I had once associated with mundane breaks and casual conversations, was now the setting for the unraveling of my world. The recording on my phone was more than just evidence. It was a painful testament to every moment of doubt I had tried to ignore, every red flag that I had hoped was just a misunderstanding. It captured the intimate moments between Lauren and Travis, moments that were now irrevocably mine to bear witness to. Standing there, enveloped by a swirling mix of emotions, I felt a profound sense of isolation. Every word that Lauren spoke, every dismissive gesture, underscored the stark truth that our marriage had become a relic of a past that no longer existed. Her admission that her love for me was never as deep as I believed was a revelation that cut deeper than any betrayal could. It was a final, unambiguous confirmation that the person I had devoted my heart to was no longer mine, that the life we had promised each other was built on falsehoods and half-truths. I remember the intensity of that moment as if it were etched into my very soul. The anger that surged through me was intermingled with an overwhelming sadness, a despair that felt both endless and suffocating. I had come seeking the truth, and the truth was more devastating than I could have ever imagined. The stark reality of Lauren's indifferent betrayal left me with nothing but a recording of our shattered dreams and a silence that screamed of lost hope. In the aftermath, as I stood alone in the cold light of that afternoon, I couldn't help but question where everything had gone so terribly wrong. Was it something I had failed to notice, a silent cry for help that I had misinterpreted? Or was it that Lauren had simply grown apart from me, her heart drifting away long before the betrayal became undeniable? The questions swirled endlessly in my mind, each one a painful reminder of the life that was slipping irretrievably from my grasp. Walking away from Travis's house, every step felt like a march into an uncertain future. I carried with me the recording on my phone, a digital chronicle of the end of everything I once held dear. It wasn't just evidence of infidelity. It was the stark, unyielding proof that our shared life was now a series of illusions shattered by betrayal. As I drove away, the weight of Lauren's cold words echoed in my mind, a constant reminder that nothing in life, no matter how meticulously built, can remain unchanged when the truth finally finds its way to the surface. That day, I confronted not just the betrayal of a partner, but the painful realization that love, as I had known it, was perhaps nothing more than a fragile, fleeting illusion. And as I try to make sense of the fragments of my broken heart, I know that some wounds never truly heal. They simply fade into a quiet, persistent ache, reminding me of the day when everything changed. I woke up the morning after that shattering confrontation with a heart heavy and a mind racing faster than I ever thought possible. In the wake of Lauren's cold, dismissive words and the undeniable evidence of her betrayal, I knew I had no choice but to accept that our marriage was over. Every memory, the laughter during long drives, the quiet shared moments in our once peaceful home, turned bittersweet as I realized that the foundation of our life had been built on a lie. Without hesitation, I began the grueling process of preparing for divorce. I made the painful decision to tell my family everything, each word a dagger of truth that cut deep but was necessary for the healing I desperately needed. My phone buzzed with calls from loved ones, but it was my brother Alex's voice that offered the first real measure of support. He arrived at our house within hours, a silent sentinel in the midst of chaos. Together, we changed the locks on our front door, a symbolic severing of the last tangible tie to the life I once shared with Lauren. I watched as Alex tightened the last bolt, each turn a reminder that I was stepping into a future that was now completely my own. Lauren, ever the enigma in our unraveling drama, soon left our home to move in with her sister. It was a move that confirmed everything I had feared, that she was ready to walk away, to create a new life separate from the one we had built together. The decision about the children was one of the hardest I ever had to make. After many sleepless nights and tearful conversations, it was determined that the children would remain with me. Even though I knew the prospect of raising them alone was daunting, I could not let the wounds of betrayal further scar their tender hearts. Their small, confused faces were a constant reminder of the love I had once promised to protect, and that I still vowed to safeguard, no matter what. Armed with the damning recording from Travis's house, the undeniable evidence of Lauren's infidelity, I handed it over to my attorney. In court, that recording became the centerpiece of my case. Every whispered word, every intimate moment caught on tape, was laid bare for all to see. It wasn't just proof of betrayal. It was the wrecking ball that dismantled every illusion I had clung to for so long. The legal process, though excruciatingly slow and methodical, eventually delivered its verdict. Not only did the evidence pave the way for a swift divorce, but it also rippled outward to devastate Travis's life. The company he once worked for, unwilling to tolerate the fallout of his actions, terminated his employment. In a way, watching him lose everything was a bitter form of justice, a confirmation that betrayal, no matter how cunningly hidden, cannot remain unpunished. Yet, even as these tangible consequences began to solidify, the emotional aftermath of that day continued to haunt me. I found myself standing in the now empty halls of our home, the echoes of happier times clashing with the stark reality of my new existence. There was a peculiar, almost surreal liberation in knowing that I was finally free from the constant gnawing of deceit. With every passing day, I began to see that this painful rupture might also be an opportunity, a chance to rediscover who I was beyond the roles of husband and father. My brother Alex became not just a helper but a lifeline. He was there for every practical detail, from securing our home to offering the kind of unfiltered advice that only a sibling can provide. I leaned on him as I navigated the labyrinthine world of legal paperwork, custody arrangements, and the endless questions about what the future might hold. There were nights when I would sit on our front porch, staring out at the darkness, grappling with the overwhelming mix of grief and relief that surged within me. I wondered how I would ever piece my life back together, how I would ever trust again. But with Alex's unwavering presence and the support of my family, I slowly began to accept that sometimes the end of one chapter is simply the prelude to another. The divorce proceedings themselves dragged on, each court session a painful reminder of what had been lost. Yet, every time I listened to the recording playing in the courtroom, I felt a strange catharsis. That small device, which had once represented my desperate need for proof, now served as the instrument that sealed my fate and set me free. It was a stark, unyielding reminder that sometimes the truth is more brutal than any lie, and that exposing it can lead to consequences both expected and unforeseen. In the midst of all this legal and personal upheaval, life took on a new, raw rhythm. The children, though confused and vulnerable, adapted in their own resilient ways. I became both their guardian and their source of stability, doing my best to shield them from the harsh realities that had upended our family. Every bedtime story, every shared meal, became a ritual of resistance against the chaos that had once threatened to consume us. I found solace in their laughter, a fragile, yet persistent sound that reminded me of the enduring nature of love, even in the face of betrayal. At work, the repercussions of the scandal were just as profound. Travis's abrupt firing sent ripples through the office, a cautionary tale of the dangers of unchecked infidelity and the inevitable fall from grace that follows when truth is unearthed. Colleagues whispered in hushed tones about the downfall of a man who had once been so casually trusted, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction mingled with the sorrow of all that had transpired. It was a small, bittersweet vindication that the system, flawed as it might be, had managed to deliver a measure of justice. As the months passed, the legal battles subsided into a memory, a raw, lingering ache that I carried with me as both a scar and a reminder of the fragility of trust. I devoted myself to rebuilding the shattered pieces of our lives. I enrolled in counseling sessions to untangle the complex web of emotions that now defined my existence, seeking not just to heal, but to understand how a life that once seemed so stable could crumble so completely. Through therapy, I learned that healing is not a linear process but a tumultuous journey filled with setbacks and small victories. I began to embrace the idea that while the past could never be rewritten, the future was still an unwritten page waiting for my story. There were moments, in the quiet early hours of the morning, when the weight of loneliness and regret nearly became unbearable. I would sit at the kitchen table, a single cup of coffee growing cold beside me, and replay the recording in my mind. The sound of Lauren's indifferent voice, the intimacy captured between her and Travis, and the moment when everything fell apart. Those memories were seared into my consciousness, a relentless reminder that the price of betrayal is paid in full, often with the currency of one's own heart. And yet, it was in those moments of despair that I found a strange determination to forge a new path. One particularly harsh winter evening, as the wind howled outside and the chill seeped through the cracks of our newly fortified home, I received an unexpected call from a friend who had also suffered a betrayal of sorts. In the midst of shared grief, we discovered that our pain was not unique, that the human heart, for all its vulnerability, is also remarkably resilient. This conversation, raw and unfiltered, sparked something in me. I realized that while the betrayal had cut me deeply, it had also forced me to confront parts of myself I had long ignored. I began to explore passions and interests that had been relegated to the background of a life defined by routine and compromise. Slowly, the act of rebuilding became a process of self-discovery, an awakening to the realization that I was more than the sum of my shattered dreams. The legal verdict, delivered in a cold, matter-of-fact tone, was the final nail in the coffin of our shared past. With the divorce finalized, I gathered the last remnants of what we once had and began to close the chapter on a story that was as painful as it was transformative. Lauren's indifferent acceptance of our demise, her quiet departure to live with her sister, and the irrevocable damage inflicted by her betrayal all left indelible marks on my soul. Yet, in that very destruction, I found the seeds of a new beginning, a chance to build a life based on truth and self-reliance. In the aftermath, I compiled all the evidence of our unraveling, a montage of memories, recordings, and shattered promises, and stored it away not as a trophy of my pain, but as a reminder of the importance of honesty and accountability. The recording that had once symbolized my desperate need for confirmation now served as a testament to the idea that no matter how deeply one is deceived, the truth eventually finds a way to emerge. Travis's downfall was a bitter irony that underscored the consequences of his actions, a narrative twist that ensured he paid dearly for betraying not just me, but the sanctity of trust in our shared world. Now, As I sit here reflecting on everything that has transpired, I'm struck by the surreal blend of sorrow, relief, and cautious optimism that defines my days. The path to healing is long and fraught with reminders of what I've lost, yet with every small victory, the laughter of my children, the unwavering support of family, the quiet moments of self-realization, I take another step toward reclaiming the person I once was. I've come to understand that betrayal, while it may leave scars that never fully fade, also opens up a space for growth and renewal. Every evening, when I lock the door behind me, a door that once symbolized a shared dream now stands as a bastion of a new beginning. I'm reminded of the strength it takes to move forward. My life, forever altered by events that I never could have anticipated, is slowly being rebuilt on a foundation of hard-won truth and the steadfast resilience of the human spirit. Though the past remains a haunting echo in the recesses of my mind, it no longer holds me captive. Instead, it serves as a guidepost, a stark reminder that while trust may be fragile, the capacity to heal and begin anew is infinitely more robust. The journey is far from over. There are days when the weight of loneliness and regret presses upon me with an almost unbearable intensity, and nights when I lie awake, haunted by memories of what was. But there are also days when the sunrise brings with it a promise, a subtle, yet profound reminder that even the deepest wounds can pave the way for new beginnings. The laughter of my children, the steadfast encouragement of Alex, and the quiet moments of introspection all combine to form a mosaic of resilience that I am slowly, but surely, learning to embrace. Looking back, I realized that the betrayal and the subsequent fallout were not the end of my story but rather a harsh, necessary prelude to the next chapter. In the fragments of a broken past, I have found the raw materials to build something genuine and lasting. My heart may bear scars, and the memory of Lauren's indifference will always be a bittersweet note in the symphony of my life. But each day offers a chance to rewrite the narrative, to turn pain into power, and to transform loss into a stepping stone toward a future defined not by betrayal, but by hope and renewed purpose. As I continue on this uncertain journey, I share my story not as a tale of victimhood, but as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. I have learned that sometimes, the most devastating betrayals lead us to a deeper understanding of who we are and what we truly deserve. The road ahead may be long and riddled with obstacles, but with every step, I find a little more strength, a little more clarity, and a little more hope. And so, with the memory of a shattered past gently fading into the background, I move forward, determined to build a future that honors both the pain of yesterday and the promise of tomorrow. In the end, while the evidence of betrayal may have torn apart the familiar fabric of my life, it has also woven together a new tapestry, one defined by authenticity, resilience, and the unwavering belief that even in the face of the darkest storms, there is always the possibility of a new dawn. I remember the day after everything unraveled as if it were a scene from a movie I never wanted to star in. Life had already taken on an unrecognizable shape, and now the final act was beginning to reveal itself. In the midst of the chaos, I started hearing fragments of conversations, whispers through Lauren's sister, that painted a picture even bleaker than I had imagined. According to her, Lauren had tried to justify everything, insisting that she'd been drawn to Travis's wild behavior. She admitted, almost in a half-confession to someone who was supposed to be a trusted friend, that it wasn't me she was attracted to at all. Instead, it was that untamed, unpredictable side of Travis that had lured her in, a stark contrast to the stable, caring life I had always offered. That revelation was a bitter confirmation of a truth I had been slowly piecing together. Lauren had never truly loved me. I had clung to the belief that our marriage was built on mutual care and commitment, but now I saw that I was simply a steady rock in her turbulent sea, a source of security that she used to anchor herself even as she craved the exhilaration of reckless passion. The stability I provided had been nothing more than a convenience to her, a safety net that could be abandoned at the slightest whim. As the final threads of our marriage were cut during the divorce proceedings, Lauren's life seemed to unravel in parallel. She moved in with her sister, and the instability that had once fueled her rebellious streak began to manifest in other ways. I soon learned that her new husband, a man she rushed into a relationship with after our separation, was already showing signs of being unable to offer the kind of stability she so desperately craved. The whispers were enough to convince everyone that her new life was on shaky ground, destined to crumble just as our shared past had. It was in the quiet aftermath of these revelations that I finally made a decision, not just about how to move forward, but about who I needed to be. I chose to focus on what remained unbroken: my children. Despite the fractures in our family, I knew that my role as their guardian was both my responsibility and my salvation. The children, with their innocent resilience and the way they still found joy in small moments, became my beacon in the darkness. I threw myself into raising them, determined to give them the kind of love and stability that had been undermined by betrayal. The transition wasn't easy. There were days when the raw pain of betrayal and the memories of laughter shared in happier times collided in a storm of emotion that left me reeling. I would sit at the kitchen table after they had gone to bed, replaying the events over and over in my mind. The cold indifference in Lauren's eyes, the harsh sound of my own voice shattering the silence in that driver's lounge, the finality of her parting words. In those moments, it was almost impossible to imagine that I could ever rebuild a life free from that sorrow. Yet, slowly, the wreckage of our past began to reveal the possibility of a new beginning. I sought solace in the little victories: a spontaneous smile from one of the kids, a shared joke that lightened the heaviness of the day, a quiet evening where the only sound was the soft hum of the television and our comfortable silence. I started to see that, despite everything, there was still a future worth fighting for. A future that didn't revolve around the betrayals and broken promises of the past, but rather around the genuine connections I had yet to forge. The journey wasn't linear. There were unexpected twists along the way that forced me to confront the complexities of love and loss. I learned that forgiveness isn't about condoning what was done to you, but rather about freeing yourself from the chains of a past that refuses to let go. With each new day, I began to understand that Lauren's choices, no matter how painful, were a part of a larger tapestry of decisions. Decisions that ultimately led her away from me and into a life of instability and regret. It became clear that the wild allure she had chased was nothing more than a mirage, a fleeting escape that had left her stranded in a place where even her new love couldn't promise permanence. In embracing this truth, I found a strange kind of liberation. No longer would I measure my worth by someone else's inability to see what I had to offer. I resolved to create a home defined by honesty, resilience, and a renewed commitment to the people who mattered most: my children. I began to rebuild my life around the values that had once seemed so fragile after the betrayal: trust in the possibility of genuine love, faith in my own strength, and the unyielding hope that even the darkest nights eventually give way to the promise of a new dawn. Looking back now, I see that the end of our marriage was not just the collapse of a relationship, but the painful, necessary destruction of a false narrative. A narrative in which I had mistaken convenience for true affection. Lauren's confessions, delivered in moments of bitter honesty to her sister, revealed that the allure of chaos had always been more potent to her than the steady, unwavering love I offered. And while that realization brought a deep wound, it also paved the way for healing. Today, as I navigate the challenges of single parenthood and the quiet, hopeful routine of our new life, I carry with me the lessons learned from every twist of our tragic tale. I no longer see my past as a series of betrayals that defined me, but as the foundation upon which I can build something real and enduring. The scars remain, a testament to the pain of being used and the deep cuts of unreciprocated love, but they no longer dictate my future. I choose to live each day with a focus on nurturing the bonds that truly matter. The laughter of my children, their unguarded expressions of joy, and the simple comfort of knowing that I am enough for them are the cornerstones of my new beginning. In letting go of a love that was never truly mine, I have found the strength to embrace a life defined by authenticity and genuine care. A life where stability is not a tool for manipulation, but a sanctuary of hope and possibility. In the quiet moments of reflection, I acknowledge the truth that has set me free. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight are not against those who betray us, but against the illusions we hold on to. Lauren's departure, her search for wild thrills and unstable affection, has taught me that true love isn't about clinging to convenience or security, It's about a mutual, honest exchange of hearts. And as I continue forward, I do so with the understanding that I deserve a love that mirrors the unwavering commitment I have always strived to offer. So, I stand at the threshold of tomorrow with a cautious optimism. I've learned that while betrayal can shatter the past, it also clears the way for a future built on resilience, self-respect, and a love that is as enduring as it is real. My children and I are writing a new story, a story where the pain of yesterday is transformed into the strength of today, and where every step forward is a quiet, defiant declaration that our hearts can heal and thrive, even after the deepest of betrayals.